independence. People who are at the high end is, you're not going to tell me what to do, what to think, or how to do it. That's why they're really bad as employees. They're really difficult to work with if you have a different opinion. But as an entrepreneur, that's one of the ways that help them to get where they're at, but it also can be the downfall. So I think that's the other piece of being an entrepreneur. You still need to be coachable. You still need to understand you really don't know it all. You need to take your ego, dial it down, and dial up the humility. Because if you really want to grow and stay in the business world, you really got to understand things change, and you're not always going to know what those changes are until after they've occurred. The number one trait is their ability to listen, and then listen some more. And then ask open-ended questions. Who, what, when, where, why.
Welcome back to the Hustle and Grind podcast, the show where we dig into why real entrepreneurs trade comfort for conviction. This isn't about vanity metrics or overnight success. It's about the stories behind building a reputation that actually matters. I'm your host, Andrew, keynote architect, platform builder, and fellow founder in the trenches. Today, I'm sitting down with Jeannette Seibly, an award-winning talent advisor and leadership results coach who's been in the game for over 32 years. Jeannette has helped countless business owners, bosses, and leaders conquer their biggest challenges, from hiring the right people to building a culture of success. She's a true champion for those who are ready to elevate their results and expand their impact. I'm excited to hear her insights on what it takes to build a team and a legacy that truly matters. Jeannette, thank you so much for being on the show today. Really appreciate it. I really it's fortunate to have you here. You have so much experience. I know we've been talking a little bit before the show started and already had a good conversation, already have a lot of wisdom to spread. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So again, thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Yeah, I am too. Thanks.
Anytime. So one of the things that we just totally resonated on, and I think is something, I've said it before, and I think it's really important, and it's right up your wheelhouse, is when you start in this entrepreneurial journey, one of the things that happens is you are faced with every single one of your demons, and you are forced to handle them. Like, there's no other choice out of this. You need to deal with this. And you've been doing this for 30 some odd years. You've seen a lot. Tell me a little bit about what that means to you and how you've worked with people through a lot of it. So tell me a little bit about what that means to you.
Well, a lot of times people come in to, well, I don't know if they come in. So let me start again. So people create their own company, their own job, and they go, woohoo, now I can do what I want, how I want, when I want, if I want, yada, yada, yada. Mm-hmm. The problem with that particular demon is you still have to be able to work with and through people to get the job done. And so if you had some challenges in your corporate job, or you had challenges that prevented you from getting a corporate job, those are your demons. And so that's why it's really, really critical to really understand what they are, how they're going to look, but also understand that what might not be a demon over here might be a demon over here. So for example, if you're somebody who works well with really large companies, you're very fluid, you're one of those salespeople who's very patient, then that's one area that'll be fine. But if you try to take those same set of skills and put them over here into small businesses that operate real quickly, that will become a demon, because then you're going to get frustrated, you're going to get upset, you're going to do whatever you do that could blow up your company.
And I think it works the other way as well, where with entrepreneurs, when we first start off, we're chief everything officer. You know, your job title is yes, whatever has to happen right now. And I've experienced that. Like, exactly. And if there's a fire, you put it out. And once they get to a certain point, though, now you have to start acting more like a corporation, and it becomes a problem. And it's a different skill set that has to happen. My mom and I were talking about this the other day, and she noticed it with nonprofits where they have the same issue. You have this one person with this awesome vision, but once they get to a certain point, now you have to work like a company. It's not what we are terrible employees. Like we're awful employees. I think as entrepreneurs.
We can be.
We can be. Exactly. We like to do our own thing. So tell me a little bit about your experience with that, just to help people through that process and what that might look like.
Well, for myself, I had gone through a number of downsizings and company restructurings. And so you get to a point back before it was okay to have more than a couple jobs in a 10 years to really, I mean, it's like one of those things, okay, what else am I going to do? I'm too young to retire, right? I'm not a trust fund baby or person or whatever variation of that. And so it was like, okay, I'm going to start on my own. And that was in 1992. And I happened to connect with some gentlemen who were launching a new product. And so I took the product. It was an assessment tool. And I go, oh my goodness gracious. It was so accurate. And what was really cool about that in the journey on is that it had the world's largest validation study ever. And so when I'm working with entrepreneurs, the very first thing we do with them and or their teams is have everybody take one, or at least the person I'm directly working with take one. Because it helps me better understand, do you have the personality to work as an entrepreneur? Because what you just said, you can become a firefighter. You have a lot of things that don't happen according to how you think they should. Are you able to handle them, and how well are you able to handle them? And that's critical.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think in any business, there's certain skill sets that are really good at specific things. And, I think we all have that thing that we're really good at. We have that thing we're not good at. So, I mean, I'm very much a visionary entrepreneur. I'm really good at thinking in 1,000 directions and, fleshing something out. If you looked at my books, you would realize I am not good at bookkeeping. It is not my thing.
That's called delegation.
That's
which a lot of entrepreneurs aren't good at either.
Well, that's also called I don't want to deal with it.
Well, we come back to here's the solution.
It goes back to the old adage of work your strengths, hire your weaknesses. But you're talking about an assessment on it. And I think a lot of people think that assessments are just this panacea and, oh, hey, I took DISC and I'm a D and I can go do this thing. I don't think people actually understand what it means when you say this has been actually, let's put a word to it, stress tested. Like, we have proven this works. There's some statistics behind it. Go into a little bit about that assessment and why it's, I want to say better than everything else, but why it's really proven itself to you.
Well, the reason the PXT Select works is because it has the world's largest validation study in the market today. Doesn't mean it can't change or something else may not come up, but for right now it is. It looks at a person's thinking style, their core behavior, their occupational interest. There's only one other assessment out there that does the same thing. So when you have that large of a validation study and you have some really top-notch psychologists, scientists that are putting together the algorithms, making sure the validity, reliability is there, the predictive validity, etc. How, and the distortion, how forthright are you being in answering the questions? When you put all that together, you become like the granddaddy of all assessments. This tool's been around for over 34 years.
And I think it's important that we realize that not all tests are the same. Like, they're used for different things, but
there's over 3,000 publishers of assessments in the world. 99.99% are not qualified under the Department of Labor guidelines for pre-employment use. Can they be used for somebody after they're hired? Absolutely. As long as you're not using that for promotion purposes or job transitioning purposes. Again, these tools are not designed for that. And to be quite honest, and I've worked with, thousands of people where they said, well, I've got to take a DISC for my job. I thought, well, as long as you're already employed, that's okay, right? Yeah. And so as a result, they say, well, don't worry about it, Jeannette. I can make it look any way I want. Well, I think a lot of these tools have become a little bit more sophisticated than that. However, there's still that, is it really measuring the job and you in such a way that you can then look to see what is that job fit. Because a lot of these tools are not designed for that. They're designed more for communication skills, decision-making skills, to help improve your awareness of other people.
And I think that's important to bring forward. That's why I wanted to say, this is how these tools are used. And this is some of the things that you look at when somebody does come, because I've seen a lot of consultants use tools, and some of these tools have been very good, but it's not the panacea we think it is. It's not the thing that's going to correct our problems. We need to be able to use the right tool. If I try to start, nailing a nail into a wall with a tape measure, it's not going to work real well. Tape measure is a good tool, but it's not for that.
Well, and the real true value of assessments is to help you become more effective. So let's say somebody's a high assertive or a high D or whatever those letters are in the Myers-Briggs or whatever any other tool will tell you. It's a way of helping you to better understand yourself. The problem with some assessments is it's because it doesn't have the distortion in it, and the validity does not meet the thresholds of the Department of Labor guidelines. How valid is this information? So when you're using a tool, and there's a number of them out there that do comply with the Department of Labor guidelines, it really helps you to better understand this is who you are in relationship to the rest of the working population. It's not how you want to be seen, it's who you are. What you do with that is what makes the difference. And that's where I come in. That's where other people come in who are coaches and HR or managers, is helping people be more effective.
So I want to pivot for a second, because one of the things I like to ask is, how did you get into this? Like, what was the series of events and your backstory that brought you to learning how to assess people when they're first hired and put people in the proper position before they get into the company? Like, what was your backstory on this?
Well, my backstory is I was in HR before I went out to become an entrepreneur. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, is that I met these two gentlemen who were launching this assessment. And I got involved with that because I was so wowed by the quality of the data that came out of it. Objective data is really important. So that's how I got into it. I originally thought I was going to be an HR consultant, but it quickly morphed more into coaching. This is before coaching became known like it is today. Back then, coaching is like, what's that? Kind of thing. Oh, you mean like Little League? No, business. And then it just grew from there. And one of the things I really, how I really value the assessment, the PXT Select, is that it really helps people see their greatness. It's like, or they understand why. So I've had several people, after I do a review with them of their results, go, where were you 10 years ago? You would have saved my career. And you know what? They're probably right. Because, because of the circumstances, like say, for example, they're really assertive. They're like the little Energizer bunny, and they talk more than listen. Those are people that a lot of people go, In sales, they're brilliant. As your boss, they're scary. Yeah. So it's important to better understand where you're at and then look to say, okay, what is my real interest? How does that fit who I am from a core behavior standpoint? And what about my thinking style? Is what supporting me, or what do I need to help? What help do I need to make that work?
Exactly. And I think one of the things I heard somebody, a neuroscientist, say this. He had worked with Google, and Google is legendary for putting divergent people together into a room with different skill sets to be able to make it work. And so in a corporate setting, this is used really, trying to get people into the right positions in the right way, saves the company money, stuff like that. What I'd like to do, though, is I want to pivot onto the entrepreneur world, because I don't think we talk like this, because as entrepreneurs, we are about the absolute opposite of a corporate world, especially if we're a small startup. We're totally different. We were talking earlier, just before we got started today, that it's basically, what is your job title in a startup? And my job title is yes. Everything, whatever has to be done, whatever dumpster fire has to be put out, we're going to make it work. And I think there's this transition that happens in a company when you first get to that startup where, like you said earlier, things are changing really quickly. Things are moving fast. You're going in a million miles an hour, and there's a specific personality type that does very well with that managed or sometimes unmanaged chaos. What have you seen with entrepreneurs when they transition? Now they start to get bigger. Now they start to scale. Now they start to actually have to start asking these questions and looking at it. What are some of your entrepreneur clients who have made that transition? What are the issues they've gone through? What are some of the ways that they've been successful? What are also some of the ways that you've seen, there might have been something that didn't go right? Because I'm a strong believer that everyone is a good example. Some are a good example of what to do. Some are a good example of what not to do, but they're both good examples.
Exactly. I think probably the biggest one for me was pretty eye-opening. Working with a client who went from 1 to 4 million in 4 years. He'd done extremely well. And then said, I now want to be a coach. And I said, I don't think that's going to be your next chapter. And the reason why is because his interest in working with people 24/7 was at the bottom. So he had hired me to help support him in hiring and coaching and growing the company. And so I said, but try it, see what happens. There's, exceptions could happen, but again, don't be surprised if it doesn't. And so he did it for a week and he came back. He said, next time I have one of those ideas, let me know, talk me out of it, like that. Another area I find to be fascinating, because a lot of entrepreneurs do not follow systems well. They're great at creating them. They can create any system you could possibly imagine. They're not good at following them. The problem is, as they grow and they want to bring in a greater capacity to bring in more clients, if they're not into systems and honoring them, it's like honoring your word, honoring your system. If you can't do that, you're not going to really grow because people can't trust you to do what you say you're going to do or follow the system. And the same thing is when you're hiring people, you want to make sure that they can follow the system. Not that they're a reflection of you, because you're not hiring them to be your competitor. You're hiring them to support the company in its growth. And I think those are the two areas that a lot of times people get themselves in trouble is, number one, they don't have the interest, but they think that they can overcome it because look what I just did. I just built this great company. But number two is in being able to take that greatness, systematize it, expand it, and continue growing.
And I think for a lot of us who are visionaries, it's hard for those processes because we're used to creative problem solving. We're very chaos tolerant. We're very risk tolerant, and completely different skill set that's needed when you start to build a company. And I've seen it in a lot of different companies where the visionary ends up failing without having a really strong implementer, who knows what this skill set is. Two totally different mindsets, like two totally different skill sets. By being able to actually do that. And so that's why I was curious about kind of applying that to entrepreneurship, because that's something that I think is that visionaries have trouble seeing. And you're absolutely spot on as far as the systems are concerned. You can make the greatest system in the world, and I'm going to full transparency. I've been bad at it. I make a great system and then I don't quite stick to it.
Well, and that's another line item on the PXT Select called independence. People who are at the high end is, you're not going to tell me what to do, what to think, or how to do it. That's why they're really bad as employees. They're really difficult to work with if you have a different opinion. But as an entrepreneur, that's one of the ways that help them to get where they're at, but it also can be the downfall. So I had a client one time that got himself into some financial challenges. And I brought in a financial consultant to help him deal with it to avoid bankruptcy. He wasn't going to do what he was being told to do. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, do you understand that we're trying to save your business, save your personal life, your family's life, like that, because we're talking, bankruptcy otherwise. So he finally got on the same page with us, and it was interesting. We were not able to save the business, but we were able to save his personal assets. That was a big win, but it wasn't going to happen until he became coachable. So I think that's the other piece of being an entrepreneur. You still need to be coachable. You still need to understand you really don't know it all. You need to take your ego, dial it down, and dial up the humility. Because if you really want to grow and stay in the business world, you really got to understand things change, and you're not always going to know what those changes are until after they've occurred, if you're not listening and open to hearing things you don't want to hear.
Mm-hmm. And I think part of it is, especially when you're first in a startup and you're just getting things going and nothing is going right and you're hearing no all the time and you have all of this negativity and we're operating strictly on faith that it's going to happen and that is it.
Yeah.
That mindset of I am going to do this, keep getting kicked down, stand back up and saying I'm not done yet really is a resilience that we have that can, however, backfire once we get bigger. And it's that transition between that because it can be really difficult. And so that's I wanted to touch on that a little bit because I think it's a big issue for us as entrepreneurs.
I think resilience is really, really critical. I think one of the reasons we become entrepreneurs is because we are resourceful. So that's the other piece of the puzzle. But we still have to do the work. And I think there's a lot of misinformation out there that if you have the right mantras and you repeat them in a particular way, or you write them out every morning, or you do whatever it is that you do, that in and of itself isn't going to make a lot of difference. It might keep you focused, but you still got to do the work. You still have to make the phone calls. You still have to show up. You still have to follow the system. You still have to honor your employees and making sure they get paid. So all of that stuff, I mean, there's just so much more to being an entrepreneur than I think a lot of people realize. It's like, ooh, I get to be my own boss. And how's that working? How's the not working?
Good luck with that.
And I'm not to say that there aren't, times like this, you're going to have a lot more entrepreneurs getting started. And in 3 to 5 years, some of them will make it. Some of them will go back into a paid employee position. And either way is fine. It's not good, bad, right, or wrong. At least you tried. At least you learned something more about the business world than you would have if you hadn't given it a shot. But back to being an entrepreneur, though, you have to be open to growth. You have to be open to hiring people that may know more than you do. You have to be able to listen. And sometimes people just don't listen when they're not hearing things they want to hear.
Mm-hmm. So I want to go on to one other thing that kind of touches on what we've been speaking about, and that is job titles. One of the things that I've seen with a bunch of different companies is, especially when they're making that transition between being a startup and being a real company. So, that kind of vibe that's happening. A lot of times your title is yes, or your chief everything officer, or, you're going to do whatever it is. And I think a lot of people have difficulty with what that chain of command looks like. Can you talk to a little bit about why there's a chain of command, like why you report to people, why there's a system for it, and what some of the benefits are as you grow?
If somebody is emotionally attached to their job title, being an entrepreneur isn't it? Mm-hmm. So you really need to be, like you said, yes. Or let's talk about that a little bit more before I say yes, like the whole thing. And the other thing that I want to really caution people on, particularly entrepreneurs and startups, is a lot of times we want to hire friends and family. That could be the worst thing that you can do. Number one, they're not used to you telling them what they can do and can't do. So already there's this friction going on. It may not seem like it's going to happen, but it will, I promise. Been around this for over 32 years. I've seen way too many, okay, I think I mentioned that might happen kind of thing. Or people come in and say, sure, I can do that. Then they don't, because it's not something that they're interested in doing. So as for chain of command, remember, as the entrepreneur, you get to have the final decision and you've got to own it. Like this is your company. You've got to own what's going on. And I remember working with somebody one time who didn't want to own that this was her company because she had other people that were also investors in the company. I said, but you're the day-to-day boss. You need to own the company. I got that they report to different people, but it's not so much of owning the company and being able to tell people what to do, how to do it, when to do it. No, it's owning the company, and therefore you take on a different persona. And in that persona, you've got more confidence. You're more aware. If you really are well known for your integrity, like following through on what you say you'll do, all that comes back to reflect on your company and the people within it. A lot of times people come into the small companies because they want the big titles. Again, if that's what you're looking for, being an entrepreneur isn't, or working in an entrepreneurial driven company probably isn't the best choice for you, because you got to be able to roll up your sleeves, get in there and do stuff that otherwise you don't think an executive should have to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's something that, you know, even if you're getting bigger and you're in another company, sometimes you just have to do it. Yeah. And you're right. That's our role, is to be able to make an educated decision based on the people we have placed in charge, respecting what they say, having a respect for their abilities, but still being the final end all. And we are the one that makes the final decision. So, yeah.
Yeah. And it's the old, I mean, everybody's heard this analogy before. It's like, if you're not willing to go make the coffee, if you're not willing to clean out the coffee pot, if you're not willing to go get the coffee yourself to share with your, clients that have come in, then again, you got to look to say, what kind of a company, what kind of a message are you sending?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So again, you got to get that ego they got to dial that down.
Yeah, or it will be dialed down for you. That's, I think, what else I've seen.
That's another great way of saying it. I haven't said it that way before, but I'm going to remember that one. Someone's more than happy to dial it down for you, but unfortunately, you don't. I hope most people don't do that. I'm really committed to people owning their success, and if that success means being an entrepreneur, then go get the help, the coaching. There's so much available out there to help you, the mentoring. If that's not it, then don't try to do that. Find the job that's going to work for you. Some employees are great in finely tuned structures like a bank or an insurance company or a financial management company, because you got to dot every I and cross every T. Mm-hmm. If that isn't you, then find an entrepreneurial driven company, but understand that as they grow, those skills, you'll either need to hone them or you'll need to find another entrepreneurial driven company.
Mm-hmm. Now, as somebody who's been a part of companies who have just gone through a ton of business coaches, what is one, and with varying results, there are so many different coaches out there, and they think one of the big things right now is, hey, I'm a business coach, and it's a flooded market. What specifically do you look for, or would you look for as an entrepreneur for a business coach? What are some of the key things that would say this person would help me?
The number one trait is their ability to listen, and then listen some more. And then ask open-ended questions. Who, what, when, where, why? Why is that important to you? How do you think that should look? What is the obstacle, or are the obstacles? Like that. If they come in as a know-it-all, and I've seen this happen with companies who eventually had to close the door, they weren't listening. Then they're not using the tools. I'm not going to work with somebody who's not going to take the PXT Select. Why? Because from my experience, and I've been around this work now for a long time, it's the best one on the market today. Who knows what tomorrow's going to bring, right? Doesn't mean I might not use a DISC or a Myers-Briggs or something else to support that. But it does mean that to get started, I want to know who I'm working with and what the challenges are. Sometimes I've seen people who want to be an entrepreneur, they have a great idea, but it doesn't support their interest. They don't have an interest in technology, but yet they want to put together an app. Okay, well, there's different ways of getting that app created. It doesn't mean you need to create it, but do you have the funding to go get that app created? So back to the business coach. So basically that's what I do. I remember a couple of years ago, I was working with a small entrepreneurial driven company, and they had an employee that everybody liked, but he wasn't loved. And so they didn't quite know whether to promote him or fire him. I'm like, well, let me talk with him first before you guys make any decisions. And so we had everybody take the PXT Select. I then worked with this gentleman one-on-one for 10 sessions. The big issue was communication. It wasn't good. And a lot of entrepreneurs don't necessarily have good communication skills. But by the end of our time together, he definitely had what it took. And I already knew that it would after reviewing with him the PXT Select results. And I said, but it really depends on you doing the work. And he did do the work. He was great. It all worked out. So that, again, is how well versed are you? Have you also been an entrepreneur? Have you also failed? Have you also had to work through some difficult challenges? I know there's a saying out there, have you walked through the eye of a needle? It means have you gone through some very, very difficult circumstances or situations and come out the other side? How coachable were you during that process? Again, there's a lot of stuff like that people have to take into consideration. I remember somebody telling me one time they were looking for a sales rep. And so they were talking to this guy who had just gotten his business coaching certificate. Mm-hmm. And so they were having a conversation, and he really liked what she was saying. Like, wow, that sounds like a really fun job. He goes, where would I submit my resume?
Whoops.
You're here to coach us. And I've seen people do that, though. They're using the coaching as a way to get into some companies, but they're not there to coach. They're there to get employed. So again, as a coach, you really got to look for yourself. Is this who I really am? And is it where I will be successful? And those can be some hard questions to answer because your ego is going to say, well, of course you can. Mm-hmm. But are you willing to do the work and hire your own coach to make sure that you're moving the conversation forward?
Exactly.
And you get scared easily. I've been in some pretty difficult situations. It's like, okay, you just can't scare easily. Go talk to your own coach.
Well, and the fact that you don't ever call a coach in when things are going well, you call them in because something's going wrong.
I just want to call and say, hi, things are going great.
I was going to say, get onto a phone with a business coach and go, hey, my business is doing great. And you'll have the world's most confused coach. No idea what to do.
I would be sitting there going, woohoo, let's get your brag on. Awesome. I would, in case you haven't seen it yet, here's your book, get your brag on.
Awesome.
Another part of their coaching process, because too many people don't own their successes.
Yeah. Because we're so stuck in that world where it's just, it's whack-a-mole. We don't often think about it. It's just trying to put out that train wreck full of dumpster fires. And so sometimes that positivity helps too. So that actually segues really well, because I did want to give you a chance to chat about, you've got a bunch of books. And I want you to chat about a little bit about kind of what they are, where we can get them. And there'll be links in the description also to find out a little in the show notes to find out a little bit more about you and contact you. But yeah, a little bit more about the books.
So the Get Your Brag On book, it was created originally. I was a member of NABO in Detroit. At the time was one of the largest NABO chapters, National Association of Women Business Owners. And I was noticing that there were a lot of women who were very qualified for contracts, etc., but weren't getting them. And so one of the women called me up and said, I want to learn how to brag because I want to create $1 million business doing XYZ. And it would have been a government contract. I said, okay. So we went through the work, put her numbers together, and she got the contract. And a lot of times that's all it was, is we do not, as women, but also men, don't know how to sell ourselves in such a way that we're talking business in a business world. And so in doing that, if I just said, hi, I'm a coach, you go, yeah, yawn, go away. I already know 3,000 of you, right? But if I said, hey, I'm a leadership results coach for over 32 years, and along the process, help create and guide this creation of 3 millionaires. I'm stumbling over it already. Of 3 millionaires. If that is something you're interested in, you can say, well, tell me more. And if you're not, you're going to say, okay, that's nice, bye. Either way is fine. But it's really getting your brag on in such a way that people go, got it. Wow, thank you for that differentiation. Because too often we want to stereotype everybody. The other book, and this is a third edition, both of these books are Amazon bestsellers, by the way. But Hire Amazing Employees is a practical guide on how to set up and follow a job fit selection system. How to choose an assessment product that will fit your needs and comply with the different alphabets out there. So you've got DOL, you've got ADA, EEO, on and on. So that's what this helps do. Now, as a small business owner, too often we think that it's going to cost more to follow a system. But let me tell you a quick story, true story. So the first edition of Hire Amazing Employees, I was at a networking event, was sharing my brand new first published book. And this young man said, boy, I wish I would have met you several years ago. I said, why is that? He goes, because I started and lost 3 businesses because I didn't know how to hire. One bad employee for a small company could take that company under. And so the whole reason for doing it in a systematic way is to really help build on your success and then make it sustainable.
Awesome. Jeannette, thank you for being on the show today. Really appreciate you. Appreciate the wisdom you've spent. I know you've spent a long time in this. I think this is something that entrepreneurs need to hear. And I think it's, again, there's a lot of business coaches out there, but there's some specific things, some specific issues that we face as entrepreneurs. And
yes,
thank you so much for helping us clarify those. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. And thanks for inviting me to be on your show. Loved it.
Anytime. Thanks for tuning in to the Hustle and Grind podcast, where we unpack what it really takes to build something that matters. If today's conversation hit home, do me a favor. Share it with someone who's in the trenches too. And if you're building your own brand, platform, or message and want help turning that story into serious authority, head over to theauthorityforge.com to see how we can help. Until next time, keep showing up, keep shipping, and keep chasing the work that sets you on fire. I'm Andrew, and this was the Hustle and Grind podcast.